had plans for this Q&A to be outside with Andrew, making it really interactive and like on a walk, and alas, it is raining and really gross outside, and I'm also feeling tired. We've had a lovely few days seeing people, and perhaps somewhat predictably I am feeling spent. We're changing plans and we're going to have a cozy Q&A instead inside my house. Thank you for all of your questions on Instagram and here on YouTube. I appreciate you taking any interest whatsoever in my life experiences. Let's get into it. So question number 1 is, how did you realise that you are autistic? So it was a long journey. I have always felt in the pit of my stomach like there was something different about me, and I could never quite pinpoint what it was. This, combined with the fact that I have been suffering on and off with my mental health since I was in my late teens, early 20s, led me to develop a very special interest in humanhood, the human condition, human experience, how people interact, how people interrelate. And I looked at this through all sorts of lenses: psychology, spirituality, personality types, and eventually I was led to discover the concept of neurodivergence, but it was all by chance. I remember specifically the article that I came across that sparked the moment for me, which was by Samantha Craft, and it's an unofficial list of lived experiences that she gathered through research that she conducted about women's lived experiences as autistic people over the course of her career. When I read it, I cannot tell you, I was like, oh, that's me. This is it. This started me off on a frenzy of research into the diagnostic criteria, the DSM. I will link the blog post that I'm referring to by Samantha Craft in the description box for you as well. I hope you don't mind. I felt like I needed to lie down. So question number 2 is, what were the signs that made you think you are autistic? And I think you mentioned possibly ADHD. After I found that list, the issues that I've been having, that I've been told by doctors and therapists for years were mental health related, started to make a lot more sense. To be diagnosed with autism spectrum disorder, one has to meet all of the criteria, which I did. But in terms of signs from my lived experience, sort of personally, these were things like, in fact, I made a list, let me read them so that I don't miss anything out. Always feeling on the periphery of social interactions, scripting and preparing questions before social events, bottom-up thinking, which often meant I found my job very stressful. Bottom-up thinking is basically, instead of seeing the big picture before you look at the detail, you look at all of the detail and then you build the big picture. Issues with emotional regulation and shutdowns and meltdowns, many of which now I see I had learned to internalize, which was terrible for my mental health. Constantly irritable with my partner when there was nothing wrong, seemingly. Exhausted to the point of burnout every month. Exhaustion from social interactions to the point where doing anything on the weekends outside of work felt like a monumental task. Obsessive interests that I'd rather spend my time on than seeing people. Interception issues like not realising I hadn't eaten or being unable to say what I'm feeling other than overwhelmed or fine. And in terms of ADHD, that's a valid question, but I'm going to hold off speaking about ADHD for now because I'm not currently formally diagnosed. I'm going through the diagnosis process. I'd rather wait to see if the professionals think that I am ADHD before I talk about it. Question number 3. I've wrote Andrew in. The question is, hi Charlie, really appreciate and enjoy your videos. I was wondering if any of your family, friends or acquaintances picked up on the fact you were autistic before you did, and did they mention it? So from my perspective, no one ever raised it with me, or since diagnosis said, I knew it, that's no surprise. They also didn't say the opposite, but no one was like, oh, I secretly knew. So no, I think the general consensus is that no one knew. I asked Andrew whether he noticed anything, and I wanted him to share a specific part of what he said because I thought it was very interesting.
Yes, so when we first started dating, Charlie and I worked at the same law firm. I think Charlie struggled with the stress of a law firm perhaps more than the average person we worked with, but law firms are inherently stressful places, and Charlie's response to the stress was bad, and there were tears and kind of the beginnings of burnout, but unfortunately that's within the normal bounds of the response of people within law firms.
Yeah, like there's always at least a few people in an intake of lawyers who just like completely just react in a different way. Like some people just get on with it and they're able to set boundaries and kind of like just compartmentalize.
Yeah.
Exactly. We realized that actually when I moved from doing law in private practice, which is what Andrew's just described, to going in-house, which means working in a company, I was still struggling, but the demands on me were a lot less. And then when I went from being full-time in-house to part-time in-house, that was when I think we were both like, okay, it was meant to get easier. The hours were less, the demands were less, the role was less. It was still a problem and the same issues were still occurring. So that's, I think, when we were both like, okay, and there's something else.
Yeah, agreed. And I mean, the one thing to note is Charlie was a hyper competent lawyer in terms of it's true, in terms of the day by day, the actual work,
the job,
what her colleagues saw, what the people she reported to saw was very, very high quality work, probably fed by what we now know as the autism. I mean, the blunt way to put it is the inability to play the game. Mm-hmm. So to never skimp on any piece of work. Whereas every single person in every single intense job or even not intense job has to prioritise and has to play the game of pretending that you're putting 100% effort into everything, but of course actually prioritising certain work streams, work from certain people, and Charlie couldn't do that. So Charlie gave 100% on every single item of work she got, whether it was the smallest or the largest, no matter who asked her to do it, she could never say no. So weirdly, your work product was probably higher than anyone they'd ever had, but it comes at a cost.
And I think also now you say it, that, you know, as you grow older and you get more senior within your job, it's like the demands on you become different. So the demands are less clear, and I was very much struggling with that. And I was trying to fit that mold of becoming more strategic and kind of the high thinker. I was struggling, the manager. I was struggling with the bottom-up thinking point that we tend to have as neurodivergent people, of wanting to know all the details first to build up the big picture rather than having the big picture and kind of working out the details later on.
Hello, Alfie.
Hi, Al.
But that, you're right, going part-time was that kind of, looking back now, and this is a phrase that we see so often, but like the puzzle piece of your autism diagnosis explains so much why even going part-time, it was a struggle beyond just there being too much work, as I'm sure people who go part-time know that if you go down to 3 days a week, you're expected to do 5 days work in 3 days a week. But that was still an issue for you, but that wasn't the root cause of the burnout that we later found out to be specifically autistic burnout.
Yeah. Thanks, Andrew.
Very welcome.
Mm-hmm. No one asked me any questions about Mr. Alfie. I'm going to have to just tell you about him anyway. He's a 2-year-old cockapoo and he's my favourite thing ever. Anyway, he's known as Mr. Grumpy, for obvious reasons. Question number 4 is, what made you seek a formal diagnosis? Mainly imposter syndrome. I was high masking, and I still am in many situations. So I wanted the external validation of a professional to kind of reiterate what I already suspected and kind of knew, which is that I'm autistic. It's a very personal decision whether someone wants to pursue a diagnosis of autism spectrum disorder. And it's one that a lot of people have already commented on online. Like I know that Dr. Devon Price, in their books and blog posts on Medium, they discuss the pros and cons and the risks and the rewards of getting a diagnosis, a formal diagnosis. And for me personally, I felt the risks of having a formal diagnosis were outweighed by the positives of understanding and truly believing exactly who I am, which is that I am an autistic woman. And that all came down to needing the external validation. Okay, question number 5 is a really, really good one. The questioner says, I'm scared to make the first step to reach out to my GP. How do I get over the fear of rejection or invalidation I may face? Firstly, I completely understand. I was terrified to go to my GP, and I think that's because many of us have experienced a lot of rejection and invalidation from professionals on our journey to being diagnosed. I just felt like the same thing was going to happen again. But for me, preparation was key. So I made sure in the appointment that I had a printout of the diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder, and under each of the criteria I'd written down a list of the things that made me believe that I fit that criteria. And then I also scripted or prepared a script for when in the meeting I had to ask her to refer me for a formal autism spectrum disorder assessment. I told her when I went in that I was nervous and that I prepared what I needed to say because I was nervous and wanted to make sure that I said it in a way that was clear. And I think that really, really helped me, honestly. On the day that I had my sort of initial appointment with my GP, my husband was at work, so he didn't come with me. But I think that's another thing that you could do, is you could bring someone who you trust, who's a safe person, who you know will be there to support you, whatever happens, and ask them to be with you in the appointment and to prep them on what exactly you're going to say, and maybe even give them a copy of the sheet that you've made, so that if you do feel like you can't communicate in the appointment, or you're getting flustered or anxious or whatever it may be, you can just say to them, actually, you know, my partner or my friend or my parent is going to help me and kind of explain to you what I'm struggling with. And I know that every GP is different, and I've had many experiences with GPs in the past where they've not been particularly helpful, and that's just down to the individual. I was really pleasantly surprised by the GP that helped me. She was really understanding. She did question me, you know, she did kind of check and try to understand exactly what I was saying, which is valid. Like, I guess they are there to question you and to really try to understand. But I never felt like she was trying to invalidate me, and she was taking me seriously, and I felt that it was very clear that she didn't know that much about autism spectrum disorder, which I suspect is the case for a lot of GPs, because I doubt they've had that much training. And so the reality was that I was sitting there with more knowledge than she was. It's a strange position to be in, but in a way that kind of made me feel more confident afterwards. Say bye. Bye, friends. Question number 6 is, what do you do for work? Which Andrew and I have partially answered in the last question. It's raining so heavily.
I know.
Wow. Hopefully it just adds atmospheric calm. So I was a lawyer working in the city in London at an international law firm, and honestly it was, in retrospect, a really traumatic experience. I moved in-house, which just means to say working as a lawyer in a company, as quickly as I could. I stayed there for about 4 years, and by the last 6 months I'd gone part-time and limited the scope of my job to try and help with the things that I had just discussed. And then eventually 6 months ago, in the summer last year, I went through a mental health breakdown, which wasn't my first, completely burned out and had to quit. And it was just after I quit that I found out that I'm autistic. Since then, I have been, and I'm still unemployed. I feel like this weather is chasing me around my own house. I've come upstairs, so it's a bit less loud for you guys. Okay, question number 7. Hi Charlie, I found you after recently quitting my high-paying permanent job for mental health. My question is, I feel guilty and like I'm going backwards in life for doing this. I'm 30 but feel the pull towards a simpler, slower paced life. How do you prioritise yourself and self-care to do this? Thank you, love your channel. Well, thank you. I empathise so much with this. The feelings of guilt and the kind of what ifs of like, what if I'd have been able to keep going creep in. And especially when you've spent so many years working towards that thing, that's a scary feeling, to think that you've committed yourself to something and now it's just gone. But I try to remind myself that without our health, there is very little opportunity for doing or enjoying anything in life, and that there is no backwards or forwards in life unless we define it that way. And I've decided that I'm not defining my life that way. I see myself and my life as more of a squiggly line, and I try to remind myself of like the pride that I feel of looking after myself over keeping pushing myself on my mental health. And I really hope that you can feel the same pride in yourself. But in terms of, you know, how I prioritise self-care and really get to that slower pace of living, honestly, it's been a massive process and is an ongoing process of really challenging the way in which I think and my mindset, and how much of what I think is what I actually think versus what is sort of societally conditioned into me. Because the fact of the matter is, I was trying to fit myself into a mould that is not made for me and that made me ill. If that mould doesn't fit, then what mould do I want to make for myself? And that's really the question that I ask myself each morning. And so lots of the mindset shifts that I've experienced have then led me to like action that I want to take. So in setting up morning routines, evening routines that really feed my soul and contribute to the kind of life that I want to have for myself. I'm no longer a girl boss or a subscriber to drinking 5 coffees in a day just to get through. I'm a spiritual wanderer and a decaf coffee drinker and a herbal tea lover. Those rituals that I set up for myself are what really ground me now and ground me in the kind of life that I want to live. I don't know if that sounds super abstract. It's really hard to describe, but I think finding things that you really love doing and things that bring you joy and trying not to overthink those things and just doing them for an ongoing period of time and then reflecting on how you feel about them and continually tweaking that process is so valuable. And as I've written down here, the little things add up, and that's what I'm realizing, little things that you can do for yourself, you know, that really make you feel grounded and feed your soul. So question number 8 is, now that you've quit corporate work, do you have any plans for what you'll go into next? And honestly, no, I don't know. It's a hard one because I want to work, I want to make money, and I want to contribute. I also know at the same time that I can't at the moment, and that it would plummet me back into the place that I was in recent months, and I can't go back there. And I also have to recognize my privilege in that position, and that can be uncomfortable as well. It's complicated when you have spent so much of your life defined by your career and then it's gone, and then you don't know what's coming next. It's really, really daunting. I wanted to make something up, honestly, in answer to this question, but the honest answer is no. And I looked up a statistic actually in terms of unemployment rates for autistic people, because I think it's quite high, and I was right. According to the charity Autistica, 78.3% of autistic people are unemployed. Okay, the next question is number 9. How did you recover from burnout? This is a great question. I'm still not out of the woods. I'm still recovering, but I am in such a different place to where I was when I initially burned out. And so I do think that there are a few things that I can share with you. I've written a list so that I don't miss anything again. So let me read them to you. Learning about autism and how I can live in a way that better supports me. Identifying sources of stress in my life and removing them as much as I can. Gauging how I am feeling moment to moment and responding in that moment without judgment. Prioritizing rest wherever possible and learning to understand what actually helps me to rest. Cancelling all social engagements and obligations in the immediate future. I mean, I did that for literally months, and just explaining to people that you need space to recover and to heal. Stopping texting and calls and other demands on your energy that you might not realize are actually eating up a lot of your energy in the day. Asking for help and emotional support, and that goes for practical accommodations, but also, as I say, on the emotional side of things, like having someone you can talk to. If you have access to a therapist, maybe going to a therapist. And in terms of practical support, for example, asking your friends or your family to help you to meal prep, or getting a cleaner if you can. I've run out of hands now, so I'm just going to keep going off the list. Engage in special interests when I felt like it, but not feeling bad when I didn't feel like engaging in my special interests. Being patient and having self-compassion. A huge one, because burnout, at least for me, especially when it's really, really bad and chronic, is not going to get better overnight. It takes time. It's taken me 6 months to get here to a place where I feel like markedly better. And that won't be the case for everyone. Everyone's experiences are different. But my point is, it's not like you get one night's sleep that's really good and then it goes away. So patience and self-compassion, I think, is really, really important. And look, I know that we all have different circumstances. I wasn't working and I have a partner and we don't have children. So I appreciate, you know, my privilege in my recovery journey. Question number 10 is, how does sensory sensitivity affect you? Does it play a part in accumulating sensory overload, and what do you do about it? So yes, I am highly aware of my circumstances and situation at all times. I will regularly say to my partner, oh, did you smell that? Oh, did you see that about that person? Oh, did you hear that? And it will be something that has made a terrible impact on me, like a really bad smell, or something like a noise that's made me jump, and he won't even have registered it. And it definitely plays a role in accumulating sensory overload. I feel like the way I describe it is that whenever I step outside of my house, I mean, these noises can also affect me in my house, but it's less so than when I'm outside. So just by way of example, when I step outside of my house and into the real world, I can already feel it edging up, and I describe it as like a Coke bottle. It's like I have a threshold where the Coke bottle is full of Coke. It just keeps getting added. So you put the cap on to try and stop it. and the fizz goes down a bit, but the next time you open the cap, it still pops up. It's like energy that I just really can't get rid of when I get to a certain stage of overstimulation. Like really the only thing that helps me is a shutdown or a meltdown or some kind of like a release, like crying, for example. I'm trying to get better at managing that. And so lots of the time I now find myself not getting to the threshold and getting to the point where I can just put my loops in or take myself away from a situation, and the overstimulation will gently subside by itself. At least that's my experience. So the things that I do to limit my exposure are things like I wear earplugs. I like the Loop brand. I wear headphones and constantly play music and podcasts if I'm outside. I have blackout curtains in my bedroom to keep it very dark. I keep low lighting in my house and never use overhead lights. I wear sunglasses outside, even often in winter time. I wear baseball caps a lot as well to keep light off my face. And those are just a few things that I thought of. Question number 11. Which MBTI personality type are you? So I hadn't done this since I was diagnosed, because this is one of the things that I did when I was trying to work out why I felt so different, and I kind of lost faith in personality tests. So I just did it, and it said that I am an INTJT, which is an architect, one of the rarest types of personalities. Architects are imaginative and strategic thinkers with a plan for everything. So I don't know, apparently that's me. I would say though with personality tests, I find it difficult because they always have a scale, like a sliding scale in the answers, and I always want to be either full or not full, like either super positive or super negative, because of the whole black and white thinking thing. Like I struggle really hard to know when I should be in the middle, like what constitutes a partial answer to that question. So I do think that if I answered that personality test again, it might come up differently. So I don't know. Okay, I think I'm on question 12. What was your experience growing up? So I'm not sure that I'm ready to answer it yet. I've got a bit of work to do there personally before I'm ready to share online. Finally, question 13 is any advice to parents with kids on the spectrum? I just want to say that I don't have children, so I can't comment on that from that perspective. I made a little list for you. Listen to them. Try to understand their world. Give them space to express themselves however they want to without judgment. Create strategies to accommodate their sensory needs. Learn what their triggers are and try to minimize them. Create strategies for how to deal with meltdowns. Try not to take the meltdowns and shutdowns, and anything else for that matter, personally. Teach them how to identify their emotions. Teach them strategies for emotional regulation. Tell them how much you love them for who they are, and tell them that they don't need to change who they are in order for you to love them. I think those are the main things that I would say. So that concludes our Q&A. Thank you so much from the bottom of my heart to all of you who watch my videos. As I said, I don't know what I want to do with my career, my working life. I do know that I love making videos, I love making art, I love writing, and who knows, maybe my future will entail these things. But the fact you watch my videos and share in this really crazy up and down journey with me means a whole lot, and I know that's like really super uncool to say, but it's true. I hope this has been interesting and helpful in some way, and I'll see you in the next video next week. Okay, bye.